morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today, we continue to build a North American perspective in the face of the COVID-19 crisis and the subsequent recovery. Travel and tourism industry global total contribution to GDP worldwide in 2019 was just over 9.2 billion US dollars. The bulk of this comes from American tourism industry, where international and domestic travel's total travel-related output was 2.6 trillion in 2019. The total number of American jobs supported by the travel was 15.8 million in 2019. This indicates that 1 in 8 US jobs directly and indirectly relies on the travel industry. One organization at the front line of the current situation and crisis management is a mammoth body, the US Travel Association, the Washington, DC based organization representing all segments of travel in America, an industry that generates, and I repeat the numbers again, 2.6 trillion in economic output and supports 15.8 million jobs. US Travel's mission is to increase travel to and within the United States. It's my absolute honor today to welcome President and CEO of US Travel Association, Roger Dow, an industry legend who requires no introduction. Welcome to our forum.
Well, hello, good to be with you, absolutely.
Thank you, thank you. So let's get started. Tourism means business in USA. Americans domestically travel within the country last year made up the lion's share, totaling 2.29 billion. Leisure-based travel accounted for over 70% of all tourism in America, leaving the rest for business and other reasons. 2020 projection just for international travel was forecasted to reach 80 million visitors, and the bullish outlook was meant to continue well into 2024 to hit 90 million and above. And then the catastrophe struck, the pandemic. Tell us about the foreseeable losses and how is your country bracing for this ongoing crisis?
Well, first of all, I have to say, you've done your homework. You should work for us. You've got all your facts straight better than my people do. But the bottom line is this has been extraordinarily impactful to the U.S. travel industry. We will lose this year, the U.S. travel industry, almost $520 billion, $500 billion we'll lose. But even more important on the loss is the loss of employment. As you said, 15.8 million people get their jobs in the U.S. from travel. 8.1 million of those people are presently unemployed. That is 51% of all the travel workers. To put that in perspective, during the Great Depression back in the 1930s, a long time ago, I wasn't around for it, but to put it in perspective, the worst year was 1932 and 1933, and unemployment in the United States was 25.5%. So while the economy may be in a recession, the travel industry is in a depression. And not only that, and I know I'm speaking with an international audience, the biggest challenge we have is the very lucrative international travel market has totally stopped for the time being, and we need to get it back because we've worked so hard to grow it from 10 years ago from 50 million visitors, as you said, to 80 million. So we've got a real problem of how do we bring back both domestic and international travel.
Right, okay. You, along with top-level travel and tourism executives, met with the U.S. President, I think sometime in March, at the White House to talk about the huge disproportionate damage to the travel industry. You were there to ask for money, and you walked away with a staggering 250 billion relief funding for the industry. Share with us that moment and the President's reaction. Why did the travel and tourism receive such focus when there were several other industries in similar situation? And do you think with increased infections, you may require further help? It's a rapidly moving situation. And then the elections are also around the corner.
Yeah, well, we went to the White House on March the 17th, which seems like 10 years ago.
Right.
A couple of months ago, but things, for some reason today, just seem like they take forever. And we met with the president. I was with 10 CEOs from lodging industry and from the attractions like Universal Studios and Disney. And we spoke with the president, the vice president, and the Secretary of Commerce, Wilbur Ross, to explain to them how deeply the travel industry has been disproportionately hurt compared to other industries, and also to make sure they understood the link between travel and everything else. nothing happens until somebody makes a trip. Buying a second home, opening a new country, a new business in another country, trade relations, deciding what school your children will go to as universities. All of that has to do with travel. So it was very important for us to get the president to understand, which he's been in the travel business, but there's so many other people asking for money, as you said, and we did walk away with $250 billion. The bottom line, that's small compared to the damage that's been done, but it's very necessary, number one, to have people employed and be able to pay their mortgages and their rent, and for the small businesses to keep their lights on. Travel is a big industry with American Airlines, Disney, Marriott, Hilton. It's really 83% small businesses. And so that was the important message. These small businesses hang on forever and they need help.
Okay. And US domestic travel increased 1.7% from 2018 to a total of 2.3 billion person trips in 2019. Now total domestic trips taken by US residents are expected to fall 30%. And from last year to 1.6 billion, the lowest figure since 1991, another recession year, like you mentioned. Yet the market expects major rebound coming through domestic travel. And do you believe in that?
Yes, I do. I believe the rebound is going to come. Right now, the challenge we have with this COVID pandemic is lack of understanding. You can turn on your television in an evening and have one expert tell you that we're all going to be dead by tomorrow, and the next expert say this is really nothing more than the flu. Next, you must wear masks. Next expert says no masks. And so the difference between September 11th, it was horrible, but there were 3 instances, 3 places, and you knew what happened. This you don't know, and it keeps moving and changing, as you've said, every day. So the important thing is people are afraid, and they need to understand the situation. And what is going to happen is domestic travel will come back first, then it'll be mostly drive market and short.
But yes. Roger, your critics say this is different. Who is right? Whom to believe in this? Because you've been you have been heard saying any predictions about the demise of travel industry are way off the mark. But
yes, and I believe they are. I've been good or bad in this industry for well over 40 years, and I've seen many things. This is 9 times worse than September 11th. However, on September 11th, people said people will never take an international flight across an ocean again. They're afraid. Yet was followed by 15 or 20 years of great economic international growth. People said in the Great Recession in 2007, 2008, that 20 to 30% of the hotels would be closed and travel would never come back. Yet we followed that with 10 of the best years ever. So I'm kind of an optimist. People need to get together. In fact, I'm very frustrated when they use the word social distancing, because we're a social industry. I think we should say distancing versus social, but it will come back. I can promise you that. I've been around the block many times. It will come back. Might be slow, but we will be back.
But having said that, and I totally believe you, I agree with you, but the headlines in US, you know, I was really preparing for this interview and they keep changing. And 3 days ago, situation was different. And then we had headlines like EU heading for Trump's slowdown as it looks to ban US travel, you know, travelers to EU. That could be good news for US domestic market. Then only yesterday, California, Texas, and Florida all set records for new cases. New York and New Jersey are just, and I think in Connecticut are requiring new quarantine for at least 14 days. This is also going to discourage domestic travel.
You're exactly right. What's been happening, we've been watching it month to month, and the people that want to go to business meetings and conferences in June were 15% and had grown in, May, 15% and grown in June to 22%. And that was going the right direction. Then the past couple of days with what you said in Texas and Florida and California, we're seeing that start to go backwards again. So it's a target, but again, it will change. It's just a matter of when. And the traveler will not travel until they feel it's safe, until they feel that they definitely know this is starting to be behind them, or there's a vaccine.
Okay. Just let's talk business a little bit, okay? So for a myriad of reasons, the summer of 2020 is shaping up to be the season of the staycation. With all the overseas travel restrictions, it makes for the perfect excuse to explore a bit more of your own hometown or region, while also supporting your local community. Why are staycations so critical and a trend in US, and what is being done to support this segment? But
Well,
at the same time, we heard that Disney won't be opening as a resort. That was also yesterday.
right. Yes, Disney is opening in Florida on July the 11th. Universal Studios is open.
They may push back because there's
They
this
may.
employees.
I'm in touch with Disney every day. Right now, it looks like they'll still stick with that plan. And California, Disney will open July the 17th at the present plan. So we'll see what happens. But this, when you say staycation, there's a lot to see in the United States. It's a very, very big country. And we saw that happen after September 11th. Domestic travel is what really saved the travel industry. And I think that'll happen. Americans love to go to Europe. They love to go to China, Asia, Caribbean, Mexico, safaris. But that is going to be on hold for a while. I think you're going to see Europeans and folks from Asia stay closer to home, and the same in America. But we will bring it back because, as you said earlier, international travel is just too important, not only for the economic standpoint, but from global understanding. Mark Twain, a famous writer over 100 years ago, said travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness. And I think that's true. When people travel, they get to know one another, and that's one of the most important things that travel does globally.
That's a good saying. I'm going to look it up. Safeguarding the health and well-being of their visitors while continuing to provide exceptional travel experiences in destinations around the world. The industry needs to work together on this one for the peace of mind of the ordinary traveler. We need a set of industry standards when it comes to cleanliness and health, which can be applied across borders, across countries and continents. In an unprecedented move, your organization and its counterparts in Canada and Europe announced the joint guidelines. Talk to us why this is important.
It's very important that we brought the whole industry together several weeks ago with a set of guidelines for health and sanitation and safety. And we also shared them immediately with every other countries around the world through WTTC, and they've done similar things on their own. But these guidelines, I'll tell you why they're important. We've done research and we've asked people, if the travel industry tells you it's safe and healthy to travel again, only 23% of the people said they would believe them. 50% said they wouldn't believe them because they think it's self-serving. If government told you that, it moved to 25%. If health experts tell you that, it moved to 34%. But then we asked the question, if you heard the same believable, credible message from government, from the industry, and from health officials, would it change your mind? And it went over 70%. So that's why these guidelines are so important. That's why consistency is important. If I'm going to travel to the UK, if I'm going to travel to Asia, I want to know that the same guidelines are in place, and those people from those areas want to know the same safety and guidelines are in place where they come from Canada, Mexico, and that is one of the most important things, to have a consistent product, same as we've done with security around the world. It's very similar how you go through security in an airport all around the world, and we need to do the same thing with health and safety.
Yeah, right. And I think the COVID has proven that we are living in a global village. You know, everything is interconnected. So I think health and safety, it's not, the times are gone that you can just say, it's my hotel or my country or my region, I have to protect you. Everybody is in this thing together.
Yes, I mean, when you look at international, how important it is to retail. See, we love the international visitor because they stay a long time. The international visitor stays 16 nights, spends over $4,000 per person. A Chinese visitor spends almost $7,000 per person. To put it in perspective, in 2019, 3 million Chinese visitors spent twice as much as 22 million Canadian visitors. So that's why this international market is so important to retail, to our whole economy. And we just cannot bring this industry back on domestic travel, no matter where you are in the world alone. We have to get international travel back once again.
That's good to hear, Roger. That's good to hear because in a couple of your interviews, there was a bit of a concern that the priority in US is domestic, which is understandable. It's everywhere. But I think the international also matters. It counts, because not only because of the economy it counts, but I think countries today, the cultures in the world needs to come together again. We need to heal together. So international travel from that aspect is absolutely critical. So
I go to trade shows like ITB or World Travel Market, and I will see in the Middle Eastern area the folks from Israel, from Palestine, from Saudi Arabia, all talking to one another about where are you going for dinner tonight, what are you doing, and then they go home and then their countries are at odds. The one thing that travel does is it brings people together.
absolutely, absolutely. That's why we are in this industry. So, as the travel industry slowly and erratically reopens, some airlines and hotels, as expected, have begun slashing rates to lure travelers back to their struggling businesses. But while some of these discounts have indeed been steep, industry analysts feel you may not have widespread discounting seen after other crises such as 9/11 and the Great Recession. That ended up dragging pricing down for years. And the industry, it took years to rebound from that. Do you agree? And if so, why? And because the common consumer will seek out bargains. Some destinations are already offering free or subsidized travel.
Well, here's what we're doing in the U.S. Again, we're bringing the whole industry together, and we've got a marketing communications group made up of 50 companies, 50.
Okay.
And they are basically coming together, and we're going to begin probably towards late July, launching a consumer campaign and all through frequent traveler programs and all that, saying it's now time to plan. What have you missed? And we're going to focus on planning and living and doing the things you wanted to do and you can't have done in the past couple of months. And then we're going to rate to the right time. There's no sense in discounting travel right now because number one, there's limited capacity. So the airlines are, and you said when you discount, it's hard to come back. And then what we're looking to do is in the fall sometime, the right time, and it's the most important, it's the right time. If we did it now, people think we're crazy. But at the right time, we're going to do probably a month-long promotion in the United States of check with your local destination, check with your airline, check with your theme hotel company, and see all the great offers they have. We want to prime the pump to get people traveling. And we're also talking to the government about many things, many tax benefits that we can get to get people traveling again.
So instead of the prices being slashed, you are coming up with campaigns to start promotions again, and that's important. So there is a strategy in place from a marketing campaign, so to speak.
Yes, and one of the other things that's important that we're working on is to get liability protection. The last thing you need is for a business to open up and someone to go to their business or their hotel and say, I got COVID because I was at your hotel. So we need to protect the industry from frivolous lawsuits and for a short time, not for a long time, but saying if they follow all the guidelines, if they've done everything possible, just like you can't keep people from getting a cold, the bottom line, they cannot be sued. And that's one of the things we're working very hard on because we could have a lot of frivolous lawsuits starting as a result of this, and we've got to defend against that as an industry.
Okay. On June 18, the TSA reported screening more than 600,000 airport passengers, highest on record since a dismal decline in late March. However, a new study revealed the majority of airlines in North America are not using all of the safety guidelines issued by WHO. That only 31% of North American airlines are using pre-boarding thermal scanning compared to 88% of those in the Middle East and 70% of those in Asia Pacific. The research also found that with the exception of Southwest Airlines, most carriers in North America do not require travelers to declare their recent health details, as opposed to more than a third of airlines in Asia Pacific doing so. Do you agree with this assessment? And what do you discuss with the CEOs of the US carriers? How critical is their cooperation to overcome this situation?
It's a discussion that's going on right now, and the airlines have been consistent. They started in an inconsistent way. on masks, and now all the U.S. Carriers have said you must wear a mask while in flight. So they've started with that. They're not doing thermal scanning at the moment, but it's being looked at. And the question is that an effective way of stopping disease? I believe it probably is. The theme parks are going with thermal scanning.
Yes.
Many hotels. So I think it's a matter, what's going to happen is the consumer is going to put a lot of pressure on guidelines that they expect. And I think the airlines and TSA are going to look at that and say, we have to do what the health officials and the consumers want if we're going to get them back on planes again.
The thing is, it's so critical, Roger, because that's the entry point, right? That's where your journey begins. And if you get it wrong at that point, you can get it wrong right through. And I believe that Delta has even set up a whole health and safety new department, you know, to look at these regulations and all of that. But one or two airlines will have to lead by example, I guess. You know?
Yes. And United, Southwest are doing a good job. Delta is very forward thinking. Ed Bastian at Delta Airlines is doing a terrific job. He's setting up these kind of protocols and this kind of study, and we've been very involved with them. And they are one of the airlines, among others, that are leading the way. But they're going to do what's right to get travelers back on board again. And a lot of things you talked about are probably going to end up being in place.
Okay.
Now, I don't want to see these forever. I don't want to see people having to wear a mask going to us. I mean, that would be an uncomfortable flight, wouldn't it? But I think in initial stages, let's do all the things we can to keep people safe, and then slowly, as the disease subsides, then relax things that aren't needed. But the industry has changed forever. You will see these housekeeping and sanitation things that were always good being far better, and that won't go away. It'll be just like when we went to display kitchens, the chefs and the uniforms and what you saw. The cleanliness was still there, but the whole look changed. Housekeeping is going to be front and center, whether it be a hotel, a theme park, or an airline.
And some of these changes are for the better. They were needed, perhaps, you know, in a lot of ways. We'll see. It's a fluid situation. So even a bigger challenge than the airlines is the cruise industry. Is a recent blow when the Cruise Lines International Association announced on June 19 that it's extending the suspension of cruise operations from U.S. ports until September 15. So that's a setback. Then because the industry supports over 500,000 jobs in US, with each day of the suspension of cruise operations in US results in a total loss of approximately 110 million in economy activity and up to 800 American jobs. What are your views on that, and what are your discussions going forward with the cruise industry?
Yes, the cruise industry is been really hurt by this. The visuals of having several ships that people were stuck on for several weeks really hurt them. But when you actually looked at the number of cruises that took place during that period, it was a very small number, but it doesn't matter. It's perception, and people saw this. In fact, talking to the cruise lines, their bookings for 2021 are 200% and 300% of what they were at this time last year. I think that's a combination of people pushing their travel forward, and cruisers they know that cruise lines have done a very good job of containing disease in the past, and they'll even be better. So I think they're going to come back. The question is, getting from September 15th to the end of the year is going to be the hardest thing. I feel like people in Alaska that totally depend on the cruise industry, their summer is gone. That has wiped out the travel industry in Alaska, totally gone in many places. But I think you'll see it come back strong. But the cruise industry has pushed it off because they want to make sure they get it right. Because as you said, if they get it wrong, they're going to be right back in the same situation. So they want to be very careful to make sure they get it absolutely right.
And then it's such an iconic segment of U.S. travel industry, you know, and it's also the periphery support industries and organizations, you know, from everything from food and beverage and I mean, it's going to be a major setback if it doesn't take off, because in other parts of the world, cruise industry is not that critical, but in US, it's very different story altogether.
If you go to Florida and go to Miami, I will show you billion-dollar cruise terminals have been built by each of the cruise lines, phenomenally expensive structures, and it depends so much on that. The other thing I I want to add is this goes both ways. There's also traveler responsibility. And when we put the guidelines together, the traveler has a role to play in this also, not the industry. The traveler has to, when you're sick, don't travel. Sounds simple, but don't travel. Do the things you're asked as a traveler, and we can win this game together. So it's a two-way street. And so it's very important that travel responsibility also.
That's very important point you have made, Roger, because I just actually read about this lady who traveled. I don't want to mention from which country, but it was to China, and she lied. She had the virus, and she faked it, you know, because she took some Panadols before, paracetamols to bring the temperature down, and basically ended up infecting a lot of other people. So you are absolutely right. It's our responsibility as travelers as well.
Yeah, what the industry has to do, it has to bring risk way down. There will always be risk in life. When I get in my car this afternoon, I'm taking a risk. When I walk down the street, I'm taking a risk that I could trip and fall. There's always risk, but we have to, as an industry, bring the risk down to such a low level that people say, okay, it's like airline travel. Some people are afraid to travel, yet airline travel is the safest form of travel in the world.
Right.
You're much more at risk driving your car than you are being on a plane. And that has to happen when it comes to health and safety.
Absolutely. You're right there. So there is so much I want to touch upon, you know, with you. Your support towards the casinos and national parks is well recorded as well. And as the recent passage of National Parks Bill was well appreciated and recognized by the industry. I simply don't have the time. We don't have in this meeting to cover everything. And the casinos, what's happening in Vegas, you know, masks are being, I think it's being implemented now that everybody has to wear masks there. However, there is one segment I want to touch upon, very close to my heart. The meetings or events industry has come a long way in the last 25 years. However, there is a general consensus that the governments do not understand this segment. It seems that when it comes to events, there is no science that holds. Shutting down a 1 trillion industry was the most natural thing to do, even before lockdown started. Yet, in some places, 500 people can sit in a movie theater while events are banned. In your opinion, does this segment matter in the overall scheme of travel and tourism?
Not only does it matter, it's a very big part of the travel industry, but it matters to the global economy. When you're not at a meeting or a convention, let's say the Consumer Electronics Show, you're not buying American consumer products, electronic products. If you're not at the Heavy Equipment Show, you're not buying our Caterpillar tractors or John Deere, you're buying Mitsubishi because you may be at a trade show somewhere else. So, and that's how business is done. It's adult education. Once you get out of college, the only way you learn is go to meetings and conventions for best practices. The governments don't understand it. I'm very frustrated when they say no more than 50 people. Well, 50 people in a telephone booth is very different than 50 people in an airplane hangar. It should be square footage. Nothing, the meetings industry can control registration, distancing, they can control the width of aisles at trade shows. There's a lot of control of when they can do breakout meetings, yet the government doesn't understand the ability they have to control it. Fortunate, I've seen in the EU, they've just changed in several countries the distancing from 2 meters to 1 meter. And that will make a difference. But I think you have to look at square footage and you have to look at protocols. The meetings industry is critical to our economy. It's just not people getting together for a good time. It's how business is done.
Yeah, and you were quoted somewhere saying that you wouldn't have been able to secure this 250 billion bailout so quickly if you hadn't had that opportunity to visit the White House and do that meeting face to face. The impact of that.
There is no question about it. If although it's very effective having a chance to be with you, if we had had that meeting with the president via virtual, nothing would have happened because it would have been just the next. When you see someone and look them in the eye, when you can really explain and the president can see the passion these people have for their employees, it's so important. So no, meetings are critical, and without face-to-face, this is a nice temporary substitute. The only thing that is good is I think we've learned how to involve many more people. So I see a point where now you could have a general session of a meeting and maybe have 10,000 people, tune into the general session. I've been on webinars with 15,000 people. I thought that possible before, and with technology today, and that's the other thing that's important, is we're fortunate that today's technology is going to allow many touchless things that couldn't have been done in the past. Your smartphone can check your temperature. Your smartphone can check you in the hotel. Your smartphone can pay your bill. And you can fill out each day your health quiz as you're an employee. So we have the technology now, we just have to use it. It's gonna move biometrics much more further along. We were trying to get biometrics, facial recognition. That is going to move much faster now, because it doesn't make sense for you to hand a customs person your passport and they hand it back to you and all that. Facial recognition is gonna move much faster than it had in the past.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So meetings should not go away, but the new technology, what you and I are doing right now can complement the face-to-face meetings. That's what you are saying,
I think it's,
you still
I think
need a meeting.
additive.
Yes.
Yes.
So it won't replace, but it will complement.
Yep, no question about it. It must, and we cannot have a travel industry or an economy without the meetings industry.
So I'm coming down to my final question, and we're going to do a full circle here. And I'm coming back to something you touched upon right in the beginning of our discussion, the international visitors to US. Most flights and countries are still barred. No tourist visas to enter the US until visa services are resumed, and there's no sign there yet. The US travel and tourism industry could lose at least $24 billion in foreign spending this year. That would be equivalent to about 7 times more than the industry lost during the SARS outbreak in 2003. 8.2 million lost visitors in 1 year, which would be even more than the 7.7 million international travelers lost over 3 years after the 9/11 terrorist attacks. How important is this return of the international traveler, and how is your organization lobbying for that?
What we're doing is, it's extraordinarily important. I can't minimize how important international travel is for many of the reasons we talked about earlier. But what's going to happen, it's going to come back in the reverse order of when the countries were barred. What is going to happen is Canada and Mexico will open first, followed very quickly by EU, UK, Ireland, followed a little later by South Korea and China. They will become the last to come back. But as I mentioned earlier, they're critical destinations. And we're working very hard to get people to understand the global protocols that are going in place and to bring travel back, because we're in a global economy. No longer can we exist in the world by just staying at home. When I grew up, we used to have things, my parents talked about the 3 R's. They joke, reading, writing, and arithmetic. I've added for my children, roaming. There's a 4th R. If you don't roam around the world will pass you by.
Oh, that's very profound. And that's very profound. On that note, what I'm sensing here, that the US is a melting pot of diversity with an ever-expanding palette of distinct flavors, traditions, beliefs, and subcultures. The United States is a country endowed with see-to-believe sights and soaring possibilities, and professionals like you leading from the front. But because of this variety and diversity, the US is a nation that's hard to pin down. It's these distinctions that make each part of the country genuinely American. Thank you for helping us make sense of all the nuances around the resurgence of this country and the travel and tourism industry in spite of the worst of the virus. We wish you the very best. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure being with you. And I do hundreds of these. You are the most prepared interview I've had. Thanks for your homework.
Thank you. That's a huge compliment. Thank you very much.